there, Buttercups. Your resident Teabelle here. Welcome to Hark, 'tis the Teabelle. Let's dive in for that tea today, huh? Hey there, Buttercups. So, I know we all love that Savannah has such haunted houses. Well, today we will be diving into the Hampton Lillibridge House. And you should find a few people that you recognize, and I think we're going to absolutely love it. So we're about to get into it. So we're just going to do some fun facts about the house before we really go into the storied past. It is located a short walk from Oglethorpe Square on East Julian Street and has definitely seen more than its fair share of suffering and death, which most houses do in Savannah, as we have learned. On the outside, it is a distinctive and a very elegant 2.5-story home with a mansard roof and wide shiplap sidings. This house was built in 1796 for its namesake, Hampton Lillibridge. Hampton was from Rhode Island, and even though he was moving to Georgia, he decided to bring Rhode Island with him in the form of a house. And this is where it gets interesting because his widow sold it after he passed, and that is when the new owner converted it into a boarding house. Now, you say boarding home, boarding house, and you automatically know trouble is afoot, right? So that's what happened. A troubled sailor ashore for a short break actually ended his life by hanging himself in one of the guest rooms. And because we know that that's always something that's going to make a negative impact, it really did for this place, and its reputation was now marked. And it was a place you simply didn't want to be associated with. But eventually they did shut down that boarding house. And then it was left without any worldly occupants. Right? Until 1963, when Jim Williams purchased the home. You know, the man who lived in the Mercer Williams house? Yeah. Now, he is also the inspiration for the main character in Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, which I am eventually going to do that book for you guys, just like I did Fried Green Tomatoes, the movie. It's going to take me a little bit, though, because it is a very detailed thing that I do when I do that. But I digress. Now, Jim, as a reminder, was an esteemed antique dealer and architectural restorationist. I know I butchered that name, but he basically took pleasure in restoring homes, and he took a lot of pleasure in restoring this home to its former glory. Now, during this whole process, he decided to actually move into the house, and there were issues, obviously. The house is only being moved the short distance of a few blocks down the road on blocks and wheels. But during that move, part of the roof collapsed, which crushed an anonymous laborer who did pass due to his injuries, was mourned by his family. And that is just the beginning, y'all. It really is. This is what seemed to have wakened the whatever or whomever resided in that house. Now, it was his construction crew that actually continued to experience more issues. They felt chilling, tingling sensations on the back of their necks. There were also times where they heard sounds of furniture being moved around in distant rooms. They also heard laughter, voices, and footsteps which seemed to come from thin air. Mind you, there was nobody there. Their tools and equipment were suspiciously tampered with, and building materials either grew legs or they walked away because they wanted to relocate themselves. But we do know that seems to be the norm when it does come to spirits, you know. Now, this understandably led to many men quitting this project because it was creepy. I agree with them. And with so much going on, it was no surprise that eventually a local news crew heard about it. So late one night, they were ready when they arrived at the house. This news crew entered and they were greeted with a flying piece of construction material, and it was coming directly at them. Now, no one here is surprised. For me, that is the scene from Casper the Friendly Ghost movie when all those crewmen are flying out, running out of the house because they're terrified. Makes total sense. Now, there were some brave souls who said, hey, I'm staying on this project. But one poor worker, he had quite the experience. So he heard a loud and sudden noise upstairs. He decided to investigate. He simply expected to see something falling to the floor as he believed the floor to be empty. No. Now he goes up there. But a short time later, some of his workmates become concerned. He hasn't returned yet. So they went in search of him, and they found him. This poor man was terrified. He was lying face down on a wooden floor, scraping at the bare wood floor with his nails, uttering terrified whimpers. These men did their best by their co-worker as they comforted him, and they were trying to reassure him, but they needed to know what happened, obviously, to help him. So he explained that he'd walked into the room looking for the noise and felt instantly as though he'd been thrown into ice cold water. Now, this is when he felt the loss of control over his body and instinctively dropped to the floor to try and stop whatever was attempting to possess him from dragging him towards a chimney shaft that was open with a 3-story drop. Now, if they had succeeded, this man would certainly have lost his life. And so he shares this information and he suggests an exorcism. And that makes sense. But as he's suggesting this exorcism, a loud female scream could be heard echoing throughout the room without a female in sight. Now, there were other issues, obviously. There were other workers who saw the man in black. He was described as a tall man dressed in black with a light tie, and he was reportedly said to be watching them from a 3rd-floor window. Now, the question was this man conflicted due to the move or the restoration of his home? Was it Hampton Lillibridge? We don't know. Another man, middle-aged with gray hair and wearing a silver robe, seemed to also be hanging around. So that's in addition to the man in black. There were also complaints made by neighbors about the noises that were likened to that of a party which was happening. Apparently, according to the neighbors, there was singing and dancing despite no one in the house. And this all happened on the 3rd floor. It was reported that lights seemed to flicker randomly, but there were no reported electrical issues. And a local woman confessed to feeling a great fear of a male presence. You heard me correctly, Buttercups. I said a presence. Now, while all of this is happening, you have to know that Jim Williams, the man who started this project, wasn't into the supernatural. So he rejected the idea that his house had issues. Well, he did, however, reveal a possible answer to all the weird things happening in this home. Because it was revealed that during the renovations to this home, a mysterious crypt was revealed beneath the house's new location. The crew had to dig up the foundation of the home to seat the upper stories. And they think that the crypt was most likely dated from a pre-colonial period. Now, there were some who were consulted that indicated that this was of Native American origin. And they believe that because it seems that the walls of the crypt were built with rough lime and crushed oyster shells. But even though Williams was explained all these options to, he was not at the property, so he didn't experience anything. And so there was no clear update of the crypt. No one mentioned moving it or reinterring it, and it seems that it was simply buried under the house again. So that crypt was just stuck there. Now, Jim Williams said, you know what? I don't believe in the paranormal, but I'm going to move into this house to pretty much prove that it's just nothing. And he wanted to discount the many haunted incidents of his home. And it seemed that those same spirits welcomed Williams in their own way. He experienced his own situations. In the middle of the night, there were grating sounds and footsteps. They weren't soft footsteps either. They were described as sounding like glass being crushed. He also saw a shadowy figure who approached him and disappeared. So he even attempted to pursue one of the spirits because he was just annoyed at their constant presence, which, knowing what we do about Jim Williams, that makes so much sense. And he'd have to admit that he was probably intrigued. He chased it down the hall until a door slammed in his face. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. So we have to infer that the spirit just didn't want to be pursued. And now William's life was being affected, and it was being made more difficult. He was fixing this. On December 7th, 1963, a lengthy exorcism was held in his home. The house was blessed, and the evil spirits were essentially evicted. But they didn't stay gone for long. Less than a week later, they moved back in. But this did not discourage Williams. He just decided, I'm going to hire some paranormal investigators, psychics, and others to explore the property to find potential plans to evict the spirit. Alas, there was no one that could help him. Well, Williams decided to move on because he was done. There was no point in pursuing this any longer. Now, others have moved in since as a private residence, which means that it is not available to the public to explore. It was listed for sale in 2018 with only a quote-unquote storied past. It did sell for $1.5 million in 2019. Can you guys imagine buying what probably is a very, very gorgeous house and just hearing it has a storied past? But to know all of this, woo! I hope those residents, at least the earthly ones, sleep deeply. So we know that Jim Williams was such an impressive figure in Savannah, and he was very important to the restoration of it. Next week, we will be talking about his life. I will be doing some digging this week and hoping to find some maybe not so common information. I do promise you that I will be doing Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil at some point, but if you listen to the Fried Green Tomatoes episode, you know that I put a lot of time and effort into those, and it's a very full book to be doing that. So I'm going to make sure I do my very best by it. That being said, if any of you buttercups have any question, comments, concerns, anything you want to hear about, you can email me at Hark, tis the Teabelle with an E, at gmail.com, or you can comment on the Facebook page. I appreciate all of you and everything you do to just support this podcast. And with that being said, I hope all you lovelies have a spectacularly spooky week.